You shouldn't let your fear of the opinions of men let the cat get your tongue, because then you're not afraid of the right thing. You're not getting control of my tongue. Why? Because there's nothing worse that you can do to me than that. So I was much more afraid of losing control of my tongue than I was afraid of losing my job. Why would I want a job if I had to lose my tongue to keep it? That's insane. It's far worse than insane. It's the very pathway to insanity. If you have to lie to keep it, well, why would you want that job? Unless the job you want is like professional liar. So for me, once even
entertainment.
This was even true with the university, is that if the cost of me maintaining my university position is that I had to falsify my language, well, then what that means to me is that's not a place I want to work anymore. People tell me upon occasion, frequently, that they admire my bravery. But they're not right about that. That's not right. Because
you're still
just
scared.
fear different things than they do. You know, sometimes there's a conflict because maybe you're called upon to say something that's going to cause you trouble in the short term. It's going to interfere with your perceived status, or it's going to cause you financial trouble even in the short run. And so you won't do it. You don't do it. But all you're doing is sacrificing the greater to the lesser. And see, I learned this partly by being a clinical psychologist. So one of the things I learned from being a clinical psychologist, and also in my own family, was that if you have a disagreement with someone and you pretend that you don't, all that happens inevitably is that the disagreement deepens and multiplies and extends over a much longer period of time, even forever.
Resentment.
Yes, that's certainly one of its manifestations. Yes, well, resentment and lies, you know, like if we're in a relationship and I have to see you every day and there's something you do that annoys me, well, let's take that apart. So there's something you do habitually that annoys me. Okay, there's two possibilities. One is you're annoying. One is there's something wrong with how I'm looking at it, or some intermingling of those. Now, I could bring that up. Now, you might say, well, how would I bring that up? And I would say something like, when this happens, I find myself irritated. What do you think about that? And now I have to really want to know, because part of me is going to think, well, I'm hoping that it's you that's annoying and not me that's stupid. But I might be stupid. So I'm going to put it out there neutrally. It's like, let's sort this out, because I'd rather not be irritated with you. And so if you can figure out why I'm blind and you're fine, you tell me, and I'll do what I can to sort that out. But if we figure out that you're annoying, then let's see what we can do about that so that I don't have to be annoyed with you every goddamn day for the rest of my life. Modern people tend to think that truth is a set of descriptions of facts. But that's not what the truth is. The truth is, for example, the truth is the process the truth is your willingness to make manifest the process that enables you to learn and progress. Right? That's closer to what the truth constitutes. A process. That's why the truth is often represented as a spirit, right, rather than a set of descriptions. This is partly why I take offense, let's say, to some degree when people ask me if I believe in God. It's the same problem. People think of truth as something like fact, and that's not what it is. That's one tiny aspect of what it is.
I think that's the
so,
first
and then
thing
you said truth, you know, my truth, your truth, rather than God's truth. Well, see, whether those two things are distinct to some degree depends on how you conceptualize yourself. It might be true that you want something right now, let's say. And you might say, well, that's not a want that's in keeping with the ultimate and transcendent truths, and that could well be. But the problem there that you're facing to some degree is that you've identified yourself with that local want. So when you say, my truth, when you're talking about, I don't mean mine personally, I mean personal truth, and you say that's in opposition to God, I would say, well, personal truth is in opposition to God in proportion to the degree that that person is self-obsessed. See, because yourself, the way you conceptualize yourself could be much broader. And then your truth would be more tightly aligned with what was transcendent. So for example, look at it this way. Let me make it relatively straightforward. So when you get married, the difference between you and your wife is supposed to disappear. Okay, so let's think that through, like really practically, not theologically, just practically. Well, why should that border be erased? Well, the reason is because the border will be erased. Because if you're going to live with someone for the next 50 years, they're as much you as you are. Not least because, well, there they are, like right beside you. There they are talking to you. There they are walking with you on the beach. Like they're literally part of your experience. Literally. And they're certainly a part of your experience that can make your life hell if they're not attended to properly. So like once you're married like that, the difference between you and your wife is insignificant. And so if you don't act like that, then all hell's going to break loose. If you do act like that, now imagine what you've done to your conception of yourself. Now it's broadened to include someone else. And so then I would say, insofar as you serve that more broadened self, you've stepped quite a long ways out of your narrow self-concern into something that much more closely approximates a relationship with God. That's why marriage is a sacrament. That's why marriage is a Christian sacrament, is because entered into in the proper spirit, it's a step up Jacob's ladder.
But is your truth, and say you accumulated a whole population of Canada to be all on your truth.
Yeah.
Is that greater than God's?
Well, that's a reasonable question because, and what you're pointing to there is the potential. I see what you're after there. Well, people will find truth through consensus, and there are people who claim, especially in a morally relativist perspective, that there is no truth other than consensus. But that brings you to a problem very rapidly because you can end up with a consensus like the Nazi consensus, right? Where everyone believed, for example, that, well, the Jews were the great enemies of the German state and all of the atrocity that came along with that. Everyone played along with at least, even if they weren't active agents. So that was a false consensus. And your question is, well, what is there to protect against that false consensus? That's a very good question. And I would say, well, certainly traditional conceptions of God are one of the things that protect us against false consensus. There's no doubt about that.
It's a double-edged sword because also tradition fights back on what God wants.
Well, that's sure. And then you might see in that eternal conundrum faced by liberals and conservatives, because the conservatives would say, watch out for the now because it can get out of hand. And the liberals will say, yeah, but you can make a dogma out of tradition and wield it like a hammer. And both of those are true. And well, that's partly why the truth has to be a dynamic process rather than, say, a set of statements, a set of factual statements.